Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to give you a quick rundown of what's happening in today's forecast video before we get started. First of all, I did read through the comments last week, and many of you were reporting kind of a thudding noise that you can hear. I can only hear it if I put my earphones on and watch a video, like on my phone. I can't hear it when I normally watch it on my computer, so I apologize for that. I think it was my microphone stand picking up on these thudding noises every time I touched my finger to the trackpad. So I've got my microphone up and insulated. We'll see if that fixes it. Second thing, we will walk through the recent precipitation just to try to understand under some sort of historical context how wet it was. I'll walk you through what I think the rest of April into early May is going to look like. And at the very end, I'm going to go through the new long-range forecast just released by the seasonal European model. And I'm very skeptical of it. Okay, and I'm going to make a point why by reviewing those analogs we talked about. So if you just want that long range, come right down to these tabs, and that's where we'll start. Because the first thing we have to discuss right now is just the widespread flooding and then the very cold air that's come in behind this last week's system. So all of these kind of polygon shaded in this color represent where we still have flood warnings. This hit southern Illinois, parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana. I mean, this whole region of what we just kind of generally call the Mid-South all the way down through the lower Mississippi River Valley was hit extremely hard with incredible flooding rains. I'll show you the totals in a moment. We do have on the backside freeze warnings that are out, and this is going to be this early week run-in with some very, very cold air, and you can see they extend all the way down into southern Texas. Now, this is very unseasonal. Normally, you get into this part of the year in Texas, we're a few weeks past our typical last frost date. Same thing for parts of the Mid-South. That's why they're so concerned about this. But overall, the good news is that the pattern is going to be relatively benign with respect to severe weather, with respect to additional extremely heavy rainfall for a little while. But we do not think that this spring is done by any stretch. So let's take a look at where April has landed us so far in terms of severe weather reports. This is the total we've got right now, and as you can see, just in the month of April here, the kind of official reports that have gone into this system just kind of show the stripe, that kind of extends from Texas through the Ohio Valley that's been most active. Now, when we add it to the annual numbers, you know that we're well above average on our hail, our wind, and our tornado reports, and it's been an extremely active spring. Big questions remain. Are we going to be able to pull more moisture back into the plains, where we did get some this past weekend, but is that going to occur such that we get a very active severe weather season here? And as my colleague Matt pointed out, what I want you to be watching for, what I really want you to be watching for is when the severe weather does return to the plains, are we getting more of our thunderstorm activity producing a lot of hail reports, or are we seeing more wind? And that's going to be a key distinction. If we see the hail reports, lots and lots of major hail reports in the plains, that's actually an indicator of mid-level dryness. There's just one piece. This isn't the whole story, but that's one piece of some of the longer-term drought risk, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So just something for you to keep your eye on here. Okay, just wanted to come back to the water side of this. I'm going to link this site to you. It's water.noaa.gov. So you can go in and look at any gauge, any river gauge you want to kind of assess what they look like. And if we kind of zoom in here to the Mid-South, you can see all of these river gauges that are currently at major flood stage. So we've gone through the action stage, through minor, moderate, and now we're into the major flood stage. And you can click on any of these and get information about them. I'm just going to pick a random one here. How about the Ohio River here at Olmsted? And you can see that it's expected to stay at about 50 feet, all the way through, much of, this upcoming week before it starts to drop back down. That's a lot of water to drain here. And of course, this is, 16 feet above the action stage. So we're talking about considerable flooding. And I mentioned I'd give you some history to this. If you just look at the last 2 weeks and you compare it to that same time period going back to 1893, everywhere that you see the number 1, this will be the new wettest such stretch, and it is by far. It is important to note that where the rain is moving through this morning, and it's going to continue here, is going to be hitting one of our driest spots in the last couple of weeks. And it's also important to note that we did fill in some gaps that needed to be filled in. Now, this didn't hit everywhere in the southern plains and central plains, but we did see meaningful moisture returning to those areas. As we go forward, much of the west is going to go over dry, and you're going to see why in just a few minutes as I explain the jet stream pattern. We're going to watch very mild air start to move from the west into the central United States with time this week. But behind all this flooding, as you saw, we have some very, very cold temperatures coming through. So I wanted to give you kind of a national map. This was through this morning at 12 a.m. And it's just looking at the last 14 days of total accumulated precipitation as observed through the MRMS system. And it's just astonishing to see so much of the 10 plus inch categories here showing up through this particular region. I'll come back to some other spots in a second, but I wanted to kind of dive in there to this kind of view over the southeast so we can just see how much rainfall there was. And there are several locations in here that picked up well over a foot of rain. Some places approached 15 inches of rain. And the flooding is going to continue to get worse as these rivers crest throughout this week and continue to make this a national problem here. This is also going to force a tremendous amount of replant, the stuff that's already been planted. We're going to lose a lot of some of the nutrients in the soil as we wash a lot of this topsoil away. This will be a nitrogen issue. This will be an issue on the winter wheat that's grown in through this area as well. And this is going to be, this is significant. The historic nature of this flooding cannot be under-discussed by us meteorologists. But I want to come back and just show you another view of this. Now, this was through Sunday. These maps always have a one-day lag on them. So you will see these numbers actually just through Sunday morning, and there was more rain that came through here. So over a 2-week time period, this was 5 and in some places up to 10 times the normal rainfall. That's why we're in these historic levels here. But I want to take note, we had snow on the backside of this that came out of parts of New Mexico into Texas. And that snow water, which is melting in here, is incredible for the moisture return. Take note that there is this kind of narrow band, and I imagine some of you watching are in this narrow band that missed on this. We are filling in this very soon, or it's filling in right now actually, but we do expect the west to go over drier. Just climatologically speaking, that would be right about the time. April into May is when we lose the wet signal in the west as they settle into their dry season. But this is a good map. Now, I want to make a point. When you start to see areas that have been dry fill in, this does not break the long-standing drought or the risk of drought coming back in the summer. Because to be honest, if you're in the Midwestern United States, the Central Plains of the United States, actually, if you're anywhere east of the Rocky Mountains in summer, let's just leave it at that. East of the Rocky Mountains in summer, often the most devastating types of drought are not the season-long drought, but it's the flash drought scenario. And that is not off the table yet. And I'm going to continue to discuss that as we go forward. But let's just take a look at some satellite data from yesterday. This gets right up to about sunset here, and this is the broad shield of cloud. There is severe weather threat down here in the southeast today, but this is what's bringing the rain to fill in some of those holes that we've got that are over here in parts of the southeast. It was neat to kind of see some of the snow that was melting here in parts of the Dakotas and Minnesota from the last couple of systems that came through. And I was interested in what I saw over here in Kansas yesterday on Sunday, so I kind of zoomed in there because I wanted to show you some of the controlled burns that were going on here in Kansas. This is very common this time of year, as you can see. And take a look right down here. You can still see some of the last little bits of snow melting in that part of Texas, right through there. But on the whole, this morning our radar looks something like this, and that rain moving into the southeast is critical. Now this week, much of this week's forecast is going to be drier in the midsection of the country. I'll tell you about one clipper that sneaks through here, and you'll see the northwest continuing to see frontal boundaries coming through like this. But much of the central United States is going on a drier kick for a while, which we're going to need in order to dry out after this past system went through. But just taking a look at where we have our strong storm threat today, it's going to be right in through this corridor here. But the good thing is this front is not a fast mover. And just like it caused major flooding here, the fact that these storms are they're training, they're running over each other is what's going to give us good moisture return to some very dry areas that have been in parts of the southeast, including the Carolinas. All right. So next 7 days, this is what's going on now. There is a little clipper coming through here. I'll tell you about in a moment. There's the northwest getting hit with frontal boundaries from deeper systems in the North Pacific. But a large area that needs to go over drier for a little while will, and we're going to get that cold air out relatively quickly as the week progresses. I'll show you that in a few moments. But just to understand that cold air, this is our frost risk this week. And you can see that these cold temperatures where those freeze warnings were placed are getting down into southern and central Texas. We're going to watch northern Alabama, parts of parts here of northern Georgia hit it, and much of the areas that are currently flooding are going to be seeing a frosty temperature this week. All right. Okay, bigger picture. This is what the kind of global pattern is set up to be, and it's not conveying right now really active, especially next 7 to 10 days. As we talked about, it's kind of like week on, week off. So what I want you to see here is that generally speaking, our troughs are confined to a few different areas across the northern hemisphere. And this is going to give us systems that kind of curl up here and then roll through the United States like this, and which is why much of the east is going to hang on to its coolest weather the longest. But broader ridging in this area is going to keep warmer conditions here, okay? In addition to that, we don't see the Pacific Ocean setting itself back up in the near term for just launching huge weather systems. I mean, take a look at the North Pacific right now. Normally when I show you a map like this, at least in the past several weeks, there's just been deep lows curling up. And what we're generally seeing right now is, there's a low that's here off of Japan. There's a broader low pressure system here. That's what's driving the moisture into the Pacific Northwest. But this is not the North Pacific is not giving us a signal of major activity. It's kind of nice. You can see the trade wind activity in through here as well. This is what's kind of still giving us our last few pushes of this La Nina before we make the seasonal transition. But if I step you up to 250 millibars, which is where the jet stream level winds are, there's a lot of zonal flow in this. See that? That's just a lot of west to east flow, and the jet stream is a bit displaced, I think, right now to the north. So what do you interpret this as? It's not an active pattern for most of the country. Okay, with all that being said, I want to give you some information on winds through the first couple of days of this week. We do note that parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Missouri are going to be seeing some stronger winds. We'll take a look at the timing on that here in just a few moments, but maybe some gusts in Kansas and Missouri upwards 50 miles an hour. And to see that, I'm going to show you just kind of the current look from the high-res NAM. So we're going to watch through this morning, look at the snow coming through parts of Ontario, coming through parts of the eastern Great Lakes, a little bit into the interior of the Northeast. There's our rain still lingering along the coast until this evening. We desperately need this rain, but some snows into the interior as this low wraps up over parts of of Ontario here. So take a look at that snow sneaking through there. Now what we're going to watch is, again, more moisture coming into this section of the Pacific Northwest, but there's a little low that snuck out here by Tuesday. There it is, okay? And it's going to come through parts of Montana into the Dakotas and then work its way into Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. And where this is in time, this is early Wednesday morning, bringing in these showers you see here. And there's the chance we could get a little bit of snow out of this as well. So that's one little clipper that's kind of riding that flow I mentioned a moment ago when we looked at that forecast. Total snow, just kind of get an idea from the high-res NAM. Let's just go ahead and play this out. We're looking at right in through here pretty good chances of some heavier snows. What will be coming through Illinois, Indiana is pretty light, and even notice that the northern Rockies getting into the Cascades are not anticipating a lot of snow out of this system that's coming through. Okay, so from there, let's just take a look at the broader picture from the WPC. Over the next 7 days, through the Northeast, good chance of at least an inch of moisture. Getting into Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina down into Georgia, this is much needed rain. Chances of grabbing an inch or two is relatively high. I'll give you those probabilities in a moment. But I do have multiple systems coming through the Northeast. Elsewhere, we're in a pattern that's trying to do curl up lows here and run over the top and then try to do that. That's what they're doing. So that's a lot of northwest flow. It's cool, right, to start things off, but we're drier in this whole quadrant here. Total snowfall from the European model, just to get a good glimpse at this. We can see, again, there's our heavier snows coming through here, some into the interior parts of the Northeast, and then, British Columbia, maybe a little bit here in the northern Cascades, northern Rockies. So let's go ahead and compare models. European right, GFS left. We've seen through this, okay, so this is now Tuesday afternoon and evening. Here comes our little clipper. It's in both models, okay. That would be the one that comes through Wednesday. And then that matures into the Eastern Corn Belt and wraps itself up into the Great Lakes Wednesday, Thursday. So this is another wet go of it late in the week. If you're in the Eastern Corn Belt, Eastern Great Lakes into southern Ontario, well, the southeastern corner of Ontario here. And that spins up into the Northeast, and this is what's going to add some snow, although it's not shared in the models. See that? European versus GFS, but adds more precipitation into the Northeast. After this, where are we in time? This is next Saturday. There's going to be a relatively large warm-up in the midsection of the country by the end of this week. And then we get into the weekend, there's another low. Where is it? It's running over the top, right? So we're talking a lot about these lows coming in through here. And these are both trying to drop some snow into parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. You can definitely see that the European's aggressive on the snow here, but this is going to just stay there. And that seems to be where this pattern's taking us in the next 7, 8, 9 days. A lot of inactivity south, but much more, just systems that are curling up here, running over the top, and curling up there. That's kind of what we saw in the models. So European model total precipitation over the next 10 days. I do want to show you. I didn't show you where that was coming from. Watch. At the very end of this, the European's trying to curl up a low right here. It is not in the GFS. And that little low is showing up with the wetter conditions coming into parts of Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and this is an area that needs more of this moisture. But take a look. Widespread 1.5, 2 inches of rain up the East Coast out of these next few systems. Same thing here for parts of the Willamette Valley up toward the Puget Sound. And remember that last system in the European model coming right here out of parts of Manitoba into Ontario. Now, if you look at the GFS solution, it's much different. That's a 10-day GFS. Here's the 10-day Euro. Remember, it doesn't have this system. And the one that's coming out of, Saskatchewan into Manitoba is much farther to the north, so it's not doing this. But we just have to compare models to look at it. And I'll toss in a third one, which is the AI forecast model. This is the one just released this morning. While it's very similar in the precip forecast up the East Coast, it is, again, not settled on where this system's going to be coming through here. It's actually bringing more moisture into Montana and North Dakota, which would desperately need this. So watch them again. Artificial intelligence, GFS, European. Very different for this region, much more consistent east. So let's look at some probabilities. I'm going to show you who's going to be dry. This is the chance over the next 10 days of staying under 1/10 of an inch. Okay, so we're looking again, areas that need to dry out here. Good, we need this, but we're still drier in the southwest, drier in the southern plains. With the temperatures rebounding here, we're going to be doing some evaporation in this area that needs to be monitored. If we stay under 1/2 inch, let's go back and get that old model run again, because the new one doesn't go out that far. That's the probability of staying under 1/2 inch. And if we look at who's going to be on the wetter side of it, there's the chance of 1 inch and then 2 inches. Now, Virginia had been relatively dry. West Virginia, very, very dry. Pennsylvania, Ohio were very dry before this past system. So we are looking at some wetter conditions here and here. Okay, from there, I just want to show you the week 2 outlooks. Our models are unsettled with the week 2 pattern. You say, well, why? Well, this is not a strong story to give us solid prediction out there to week 2. In other words, what the jet's doing. The MJO is still stalled. We're losing strong kind of global signals on these things. So if you have a look, you can tell that European is wetter into the Central Plains. So is the GFS. The AI is drier. The CPC is a bit, they're trying to connect these dots between the Southern Plains and the Great Lakes, which we do expect to remain active overall. But I'm not settled on the week 2 pattern by any stretch at this point. So I need to see how the Pacific jet evolves. So let's jump from there into just some temperature information, because if you include all of March through the first 6 days of April, we've had way, way, way more mild days than we've had, colder days. Now, we've got this frost risk that's on right now. And so, there's some cold air in place. Here's today's high temperatures, just as an example. Look at the influence of the ridge over the southeast. That's impressive right there. But warm up coming out of Montana, that's going to spread into the plains. So if you just take note, you're going to go from the low 60s, upper 50s today here in the plains to tomorrow, cracking 80. While the cold air exits east. We then see Wednesday a big warm up for the plains, big warm up for the southwest and west. Now we get into Thursday when the ridge is fully developed over the west. The cooler air is trying to move out. Got our cold push here. Why? Remember, we have a system, a little clipper that's coming through that's going to curl up right there and go toward the northeast. That's the cooler weather on Friday. Getting into Saturday, it stretches east while the plains go back over hot again. And I do mean hot. These temperatures here, if you look at the color bar, they're 20 plus degrees above average. And that increases evaporation rate, meaning some of the moisture that came into this area will go quickly back into the lower atmosphere. That's Saturday into Sunday. Much more mild air invades the central U.S. Now, just to show you where this is going to go, there's your next 5 days compared to average. And this gets us out today 5 through 10. We've been questioning the longer range models on keeping this cooler weather around longer into April in this area. And I think some of this is just driven by the fact we're expecting it to be wetter here. There's more low pressure. There's more clouds. You're getting this cooling effect. And we're expecting clearer conditions here, more sun, more ridging. And that's why I think the models have kind of honed in on that particular setup as we go forward into this month, the rest of this month of April. But that's the way things seem to be shaping up toward the third week of April. We just need to continue to consider that going forward. Just to point out, though, the CPC is not as aggressive on the cooler weather here as you just saw in the model. I just wanted to point out some differences here as we look out here longer term. Speaking of longer term, the European subseasonal forecast, this is what we call the European weeklies, has also shaken off some of the cold east. So this is week 2. Notice how it's not as cold as maybe the ensemble. And as we work our way into week 3, remember, I was showing you this map earlier where there was widespread blue in here. And now we're looking more closer to average, which makes me wonder if we're going to knock out this cold weather by this weekend. Do we still see, I got to be careful where I draw this line, but what's our frost risk in this area? Maybe a bit back farther going into the remainder of April. Could we be taking that frost risk off the table? Because certainly we see some much warmer conditions coming into the plains, and we'll just continue to monitor it day in and day out. That's what we're going to do going forward. But even as we start May, you're like, wait, why are we cooling back off in early May here? Models have been trending warmer on this in the nearer term, so I'm expecting them to continue to do that going forward. Precip-wise, this is how we have things from mid-April to mid-May. And it's an interesting forecast. I think there's some initialization bias, but it is not wet in the plains. It's not wet in the southeast, and certainly a shutdown here. So what I'm guessing this pattern is attempting to do is build in some ridging here, sending little clipper systems like you just saw that curl up as they go through this area. This continues to make for tight windows if you're inside this corridor for getting a crop planted. And there is some model agreement with the CFSV2, and if I do just make some assumptions about MJO phase 7, okay, I could see this as well, but I am very unsettled with the longer range forecast. And I'm actually much more unsettled with the new thing that the European came out with. This is its forecast for ENSO, and some of the forecast model runs are like, yeah, bring on a full, El Nino by summer, and some of them are going, no, dip back into La Nina. The spread is enormous, which takes some of the trust out of this. And where I think the model's struggling is with this. This is the April forecast. By the way, that thudding is my son upstairs. That's not me hitting the hitting the keypad. But what you're seeing here, this is the April ocean temperature pattern. This is getting into May, June, July. And what I am really questioning in this is just the widespread warmth that is here in the North Pacific and the behavior across the Atlantic. I don't think this is right. I just don't think this is right. So I'm going to tell you, when I show you this precipitation outlook, let's do it seasonally. That's the May, June, July outlook. It is just trapping the MJO here on the tail end of a La Nina event. And as a result, we're getting flow that's doing this, drier in this area, wetter in the southeast. I don't fully understand this pattern with respect to why the North Pacific is so very, very warm. This is what it has for June, July, August. So it still has this like Mississippi River dividing line. If you're west of it, greater risk of being drier. In fact, let's just zoom in there. But it's the contrast, right, between the wet and dry has changed a lot. Do not settle in on this forecast from the European model. I think there may have been some initialization problems, because when was the model initialized? The first week of April, where we had catastrophic flooding and a hyperactive pattern. So I'm going to be leery of this forecast for June, July, August precipitation. And just in case you're curious, there's the seasonal temperature outlook. It is going hotter in the plains, Great Basin, Northwest for midsummer. I don't know that this is really the way this is going to shake down. So what I'd like to do with you is kind of share with you maybe my reasoning for why. This is the current ocean temperature map when you compare it to the global mean. So not the historical average, but the global mean. And what I'm noticing here is we've got a lot of warm water here. Okay, sorry, that was a poorly drawn line. A lot of warm water around Hawaii. But this kind of reverse C shape of cooler water that extends into the remnants of our La Nina. Warm water has shown up multiple times here as this El Nino has decayed. This La Nina has decayed. And we've got some cooler water here, which signals some stronger trade wind activity. Now, I'm showing you this because I was asked, felt like 10 or 15 times last week after I did my analog analysis, why is 2012 not in the analog package? It's not that it isn't. It actually is, but that thing I did last week was with the CSU forecast. Now, what are we looking at here? I think I accidentally bumped something. I did. Give me just a second. Let's go back into history. Open that back up. There we go. What we're looking at here is on April 7th of 2012, okay, we had cool water there. Some cool water here, a warm up there, and some warmer water here, but it stretched much farther back. Now, take a look at that and compare it to the global mean right now. The global anomaly compared to the mean. And this is it. This is the most feared thing if I'm in the Midwest. And by the time we got into July, this is July the 7th, there's that reverse C with warmer water here, a lot of warm water in the Atlantic, warm water here. That is the kiss of death if you are a central United States, southern Canadian prairie farmer. This is a dead ringer for putting a big area of high pressure in here. So is this a possibility? Absolutely it is. What I showed you last time, though, was just the analogs put together from the CSU hurricane season forecast, And there they are. It doesn't include that. But I made a point. Watch this. Watch for that reverse C shape with the warm water in the middle. That fluctuation in the PMM and PDO with a decaying La Nina, that is the pattern that tends to drive, a Pacific ridge that's north and west of Hawaii, some sort of ridging event that stretches from the Great Basin to the plains, and the Bermuda High wanders off. And just to make a point here, in 2012, look at how strong the Pacific High was. Way, way, way over here by Japan. There was troughs of low pressure that came into the West. The West did not. 2012 was not a hot, dry year for the West. But we just anchored a ridge right here in Minnesota. And the Bermuda High went up to Greenland, to Iceland, in the middle of July of 2012. So that's why we're just tossing this in as a possibility. And I bring that up because, all right, let's go back to it here. The ocean monthly seasonals for August, they have no signal here other than just warm everywhere. And I don't buy that. I do not think that this is the way things are going to shape up. I don't. I think we need to be much more cautious about cool water here and here and here going into this summer. All right, so I don't want to lay it out, but we'll continue to talk about it as we go forward. All right, we saw that, but I just want to remind you why this is important. Okay, that cooler water signals hotter conditions in the middle part of the United States, cooler northwest, active southwest monsoon. These are those analog years. And then it gives you this precipitation pattern, which we talked about last time, unfortunately giving us this drier wedge where high pressure settles in, ridge-riding storms that kind of case through this section of the United States like this, and an active southwest monsoon on the backside of this high pressure cell. And that is the composite of July weather during the analog years, again, chosen from the Colorado State University hurricane season analogs. And if you toss 2012 in there, it looks like this, even greater though. Same pattern, just even greater. All right. One more reminder. We did see that those analogs gave us this March through April rundown, and we already are experiencing historic flooding here. It is forecast to be drier later to the south and southeast. We have been wetter in the northwest. So we can't argue with these, right? There's something to these analogs, and that's why I wanted to present them to you again today on Monday. Last thing today, I just want to give you some global update, let you know that we have still yet to see, even after how dry it was for the planting of the safrinha crop in Brazil's eastern growing areas, there is not a strong signal here for continued drought stresses. It's just not. Brazil is not finishing this season with a problem. And then you can see Argentina, northern Argentina, continues to be drier, but it's not here. Take a look, at places elsewhere around the country. I'm just going to get your 10-day outlook for the world, and we'll wrap it up there. All right, have a good one. We'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.